There's a formula to it. A very simple formula.
Hello everybody, what is going on? My name is Jared, and yeah, this is the Slash It Podcast. This is the 10th episode of the Slash It Podcast. If you have listened to every single one of them, that is freaking amazing, and that would be amazing. So if you have, and if you listen to all of them, thank you for putting up with some of my earlier episodes. I think I've gotten better. Thank you very much for that. That means a lot to me. Just thank you so much. But, so, I guess I was going to keep this for the end. It's a little bit of a surprise, but not really, because I talked about this in the last episode. I do have a email account. Yes, an email for this podcast. It is slashitpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any, specific podcast requests, you want to, hit me up with some information about something I messed up in the last podcast, or you want to just send me a message about whatever, use that email, slashitpodcast@gmail.com, and, yes, I will keep that going, keep track of that. So if you want to send me a message about if you're liking the podcast or whatever you want to talk about, use that podcast or use that email, slashitpodcast@gmail.com. So yes, we will get right into this. Make sure you're following my Twitter @slashithorror and my Instagram @slashithorror. Just to keep in touch with what I'm doing. Go watch the bite-sized film for this podcast. For Halloween 5, I put a lot of work into those, so it'd be much appreciated. Thank you very much. So let's get into this podcast. Yes, Halloween 5. That is a, how do I put this? A very tough watch. It's so just boring almost the entire way through. It's boring quite literally the entire way through this movie. I've had to watch this, so a little bit of a little bit behind the scenes for how I do my bite-sized films. So I watched the movie one time, and then when I'm writing the script for that show, quote unquote, I watch the movie again, and I watch it while I'm writing it, so I can kind of keep track of everything that's going on. That is more times than anyone should watch this movie. That is more times than anyone should ever have to sit through this movie. It gets so boring, and the ending just is so lackluster, and it's kind of stupid at parts. I'll be honest, it is so hard to tell if it's worse or like how much worse it really is compared to Halloween Resurrection, because the things they do in this movie, it is, I touched this on my bite-sized films, because a lot of my opinions are there too. It's like nothing happens that did not happen in Halloween 4. Something about the way they just it's like the events that happen in this movie are just a dumbed down, stupider version of Halloween 4. And there's a reason why it took so many years for Halloween 6 to come out, and it's because this movie freaking sucks. Like, it is not good at all. The only thing that is, like, even, they somehow managed to make this movie 20 times worse than the other one, than Halloween 4. I don't know how they did it. It baffles me a little bit. I don't know how they managed to make it as bad as it was. Like, I honestly don't know how it's possible that they could do that and not make it, because there's only one way to do that, and that's by somehow making it so much just worse in general. And it's like they just spit out the same script that they did for Halloween 4 and called it a movie. I do not understand that at all, honestly. And the way that they just decided that okay, so I'm going to spoil a little bit. I have a whole point about this specifically, but they just added a certain character in for no reason at all. There is no reason that this character needs to exist, other than they didn't know what they were doing. And the entire ending banks on this character, and this character was only added during shooting, like during production of this movie. Okay, so let's move into some points I have, because we're about 5-ish minutes into this podcast, so we need to get this moving. The way that they ignored Halloween 4. Ugh. Okay. I am a big believer that the Halloween 4 ending is one of the best endings of any Halloween series, like any sequel. I love that ending. It would have been amazing if that's how this would have ended. It wasn't going to, of course, but that would have been so amazing. And I think, personally, the way they managed to make it just not seem even remotely important is insane to me. Because they started talking about, like at the very beginning of the movie, you get a flash of her killing her mother. And she's in like a clinic or whatever. So they kind of talk about it, but they set it up so that she would be a murderer. Like, she would be a Michael Myers character. And they just didn't do it. And if they did it the way they were originally intending to do it, it would have been amazing. But instead we got some, like, really weird, creepy, just unimaginative storylines there where they literally just repeated Halloween 4. And I think if we had gotten Jamie as Michael Myers character, I think we would have an entirely different outlook on the Halloween sequels. Because I think there would be more Halloween sequels because you'd have a whole story you could tell instead of just trying to rehash Michael Myers' story. And I think you could have done a really good job, but instead you just got nothing, and it makes me very angry. But because I know that they were unwilling to take a risk, especially after Halloween 3. They were completely unwilling to take a risk and make Jamie the murderer. Which, even suggesting that Jamie is the murderer would be the next murderer, it was a choice and was a leap, I guess. And I don't know why they didn't go that route. I know because of money and they were scared, but it would have been such a good ending, and I don't know, it would have been amazing, I think, personally. I think that would have been the best ending we could probably really have hoped for our Halloween movie. And just the way that we didn't get anything pisses me off. Like, this movie is nothing. It's a nothing movie. It's the reason why I dislike sequels to horror movies. It's this exact kind of movie. So I'm gonna try to kind of like move over into the story of this whole thing. And so the whole story is Jamie is in a clinic after killing her mother. And she like can't talk for like the first half hour of the movie, first like hour and a half of this movie, however long it is. It feels like 6 hours. So the story is so she's in a clinic, and then she like has a connection to Michael, and we see the Cult of Thorn symbol on her hand, which is important. You have to remember that the Cult of Thorn is important, kind of, but they don't really talk about it until Halloween 6. But they kind of talk about it here, so they can explain everything. Later on, it's confusing, and I applaud the Halloween 6 scriptwriters for trying to come up with the ending to any of this that makes any logical sense, because it doesn't make any sense at all. But the way that... So, pretty much what happened was they decided the best way to make a ending was by forcing a character into it in production that wasn't there originally. So this character was never in the movie. So they're in the clinic, and then Dr. Loomis comes and they talk. But Jamie has a connection to Michael now through something that didn't happen in Halloween 4 and was never explained in Halloween 4. So it just happens in this movie. It's so weird. And then so that happens the entire time, and they like know where each other are. She's like telling where people like the police where Michael is and all that kind of thing. And it's dumb. It doesn't make any sense at all. It should have not have been in this movie. If you just took out that part of this movie and just did everything else the way it is, which you easily could do, it would work so much better. It would be so much more enjoyable if they did it that way. I know they never will, but that would have made this movie 10 times better if they just removed that single factor of these movies. And so I'll talk about the ending in a little bit, but there's nothing else to talk about other than maybe that the Myers house looks nothing like the Myers house in the first Halloween. They didn't even attempt in this at all. There was no attempt made to even generally resemble the the original Halloween Myers house. Like, it doesn't look at all. It looks more like Stu's house from Scream than it does the Michael Myers house. It is ridiculous, and it makes me so, like, irrationally angry that they thought that everybody would just be, like, okay with it. I don't know. I'm not even going to go there, but it was so dumb. It was so dumb. Okay. I have another thing that bothers me, and we'll get into that discussion, well, right now. Okay, so Rachel from the other movie, from Halloween 4. So my favorite part of Halloween 4 is Rachel and Jamie's, like, conversations and, like, the story and the character development of both of them together. Like, that whole, like, that duo is a great duo. And I swear Rachel is given nothing in this movie. Jamie is literally silenced for the first hour of this movie. She doesn't have basically any full sentence dialogue in this entire movie. It is ridiculous. And they killed Rachel within, like, she's like the third kill in this movie, or the second kill. And it is so, like, it ruins any semblance of I care about these characters that I would even dare to have. They killed the best part of Halloween 4 in the sequel. As Sidney Prescott would say, you don't fuck with the original. And they did. They fucked with the original. And not the original, the fourth one, but they fucked with their own timeline by doing that, and it's so annoying. And if they could have just easily just ignored, they could have just kept Rachel. So there's this other character named Tina, and her character is ridiculous. They should have, so Tina at the end, the way her storyline goes, Tina ends up dying because she stops Jamie from getting stabbed by Michael. If that was Rachel, I would actually care about that. I would legitimately care about that. They could have easily given Tina's role to what Rachel's character does in this movie, and given Rachel Tina's role, and I would have cared about Tina's character dying. That would have been so emotional if they had killed Tina using the way Rachel dies in this movie, by a knife stab randomly through half of it, like really early on for no reason, and then given Rachel the character of Tina's death, where she saves Jamie from dying. That would have been so emotional, but instead nothing happened. And it makes me irrationally angry about how just ignorant that is, that it would have taken like 5 minutes to come up with that. But instead they just wanted to kill Rachel off, I think because they didn't want to pay her as much. I'm guessing they didn't want to pay a quote-unquote legacy character as much. Because, like, sequels, you get more money or something. I don't know. But I swear it had to do with money, because these movies were all only made because of money, and it's no actual love for the characters or storyline that they were trying to develop. They didn't care about the story. They just knew that if you slapped Michael Myers on the front cover, it would get a lot of money, and that's all they cared about. But basically, I want to move on so I don't punch my monitor. The Man in Black is a very, very interesting character, and I will talk about him basically from now on until the end of this podcast, because it's a lot. And I'll probably be spoiling a little bit of Halloween 6 in this discussion, so that way there's going to be a little bit of Halloween 6 spoilers in here. It's not that big of a deal. It's a dumb twist anyways. It doesn't really matter. But, so the Man in Black, you see him randomly get off a bus. The first thing you see with the Man in Black is he gets off a bus. And then you see him, like, walking around like a house, like an event. Like, there's a house party at one part. And that same thing happens. And, like, just the way it is developed is so dumb. He's not even really given, like, a lot of plotline. He's given kind of, like, just kind of an idiotic for how much importance he's given in the end of this series, like the end of this sequel, he's given nothing to do or talk or give him any matter of importance. He's just a guy. And so he shows up at like different party houses, like there's a house party at one point, and he's just there. And I mean, this man's dressed entirely in black, like a black trench coat, black everything. It's so dumb. And I mean, there's nothing else to talk about, so I pretty much will have to talk about the ending here, even though I don't really want to talk about the ending at this moment, because this ending kind of makes me angry. But I'll talk about the whole ending so we can get all of this out of the way. So basically what happens is Michael gets Dr. Loomis and Jamie in a corner, but then Dr. Loomis shoots Michael with a tranquilizer gun, and then the tranquilizer basically knocks Michael over, and a bunch of chains pile on top of him. And then he's like standing up still, and then Michael Myers beats him over the head with a piece of wood over and 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 over again for like 2 minutes. This man is just hitting Michael with a piece of wood, and then Michael falls over, and then Dr. Loomis just falls on top of him and stares at him. Just deadpan, dead everything, dead stares at Michael. And it is ridiculous how dumb this is. And then we cut, and Michael is in a... Oh my god, this makes me so angry because it makes no sense whatsoever. Michael is in handcuffs, okay? Not only is that weird, right? That's a weird thing to say. He has his mask on. They arrested Michael and kept his mask on. What? Explain that to me. Why would he have his mask? He's in jail. Why would they let him keep his mask on? That makes no semblance of sense to me in any way, shape, or form, that I'm kind of getting angry talking about it, because why would he have his mask on? Okay, so before I get to the next ending that pisses me off, there's a scene in this earlier on where Michael is chasing Jamie through the woods, and it goes on for like 3 minutes. He's in a car, and he can't catch up to this little girl running around. It is so dumb, and they try to make you like cut your disbelief in half, but you can't even. Your suspension of disbelief is completely shattered 5 minutes into this movie. It's ridiculous. So we'll talk about the actual ending. So we look at a hole or some other part of this freaking... I don't get it. But, so we see the man in black walking around to the back of this jail cell. The jail. And he starts shooting into the jail with like a Tommy gun, it looks like. And he just starts shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And then Jamie and this policeman are in the car, and the policeman goes back inside to see what's happening. Jamie follows a few minutes later, and there's bodies everywhere, and Michael is no longer in the jail cell, and then it looks like he's escaped. Oh my goodness, can you imagine that? No, it's so dumb. It is the worst ending, I think, of any Halloween movie. It is so bad. This movie does the same thing that Halloween Resurrection does, where it takes an ending from the predecessor, and the first 10 minutes of the next movie, it completely zeroes it in, like, it completely ruins that ending, completely. I'm not going to spoil H2O yet. I don't even consider Resurrection canon, simply because I want H2O to be its own thing. H2O was supposed to be its own thing. I'm not going to discuss it, because if you haven't seen Halloween H2O yet, go watch it yourself, and only watch Halloween H2O. Do not watch Resurrection. If you haven't seen Resurrection and don't know the ending or don't know anything about Resurrection, don't watch Resurrection. Just watch Halloween H2O. And then consider Resurrection a fan film, and then watch it, because it will make you angry if you do. So yes, that's... I realized that earlier today as I was thinking about this movie. It's such a it's so funny that this movie does the same thing that Halloween Resurrection does, and they're both the worst movies in this entire series. So that's my discussion about Halloween 5, with me just tearing into it because I hate this movie with an utter passion. I cannot even begin to describe to you what this movie does to my brain. It drives me crazy. It is insane. So yes, thank you very much, guys, for listening to my podcast of my 20-minute rant on Halloween 5. If you did enjoy this, please do rate whatever stars you think fit. And make sure you check us out, and download us, stream us, subscribe if you can do that on whatever your podcast you are listening to. Yeah, please do that. That helps a lot to get us in the ranks. So yes, thank you very much for listening to this. And you can, please do email my email, slashitpodcast@gmail.com, for any kind of podcast, related to anything. If you want to talk about horror movies, you want to email me about your favorite horror movie, you want to email me about, email like a horror movie that I should cover on the podcast, please do that. That would be great. I would love that. If you want to talk about something that you think my opinion, like you want to talk about my opinion on something about a horror movie, do it. Go ahead, send me one. Just send me an email about whatever. I think that'd be cool. I'd love to hear feedback. Yes, feedback. If you think I need to, my audio's bad, if you think I need to add music under it, if you think I need to do whatever, please send me a feedback about whatever this podcast, whatever you think I should change, please do. If you've been listening and you enjoy my podcast, please send me a message. That would be amazing. So yes, thank you very, 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 very much for listening to this podcast. Follow me Twitter and Instagram at @slashithorror on both. Podcast email is slashitpodcast, SLASHIT podcast @gmail.com. Yes, and that's pretty much it for this podcast. So in summary of this entire podcast, I hate Halloween 5, and I think it might be the worst movie out of the entirety of this series. Yes, thank you very, 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 very much for listening and watching, and just however you guys interact with me, I very, very much appreciate it. So yeah, thank you for listening, and remember, treat every day like it's Halloween.